Hi everyone! Welcome to my channel. Always remember, ignorance of the law excuses no one. This is Legally Engineer. If you have questions as regards rescissionable contract, please comment down below. And we will try to go through all your questions and we'll do our best to answer the questions posted. Okay? Now, let's proceed to voidable contracts. Okay, so this is the second kind of defective contract covered under Articles 1390 to 1402 of the New Civil Code. So, let's define what a voidable contract is.
So, voidable contracts are contracts that are actually valid until annulled. The foregoing, however, has an exception, such as when there has been ratification. In such case, the voidable contract becomes valid. And in a voidable contract, the defect is caused by vices of consent.
So, isa-isahin natin yan, no? So, parang kanina rin sa rescissionable contract, it's valid until rescinded. Ang voidable naman, it's valid until annulled. Okay?
So, a remedy, kapag voidable ang contract, is an action for annulment.
Pag rescissionable, an action for rescission. So, kasi yung voidable is, may term nga doon na void, no? Minsan kasi, ang mga estudyante, na pag nako-confuse sila sa voidable and void. Pero we have to let you know that a voidable contract is not void ab initio or not void from the very start. Ibig sabihin, kasi yung voidable contract nga, pwede yung maging valid na once it's ratified. Ang void, hindi talaga. There can be no ratification of a void contract. So, if in a contract, consent given was vitiated, for example, such as by violence or intimidation, the same contract is held not to be void ab initio, but only voidable. The same clearly is binding upon the parties unless annulled by proper action in court. So, for example, the reason why Attorney Oy sold to me her cell phone is because, for example, tinutukan ko siya ng kutsilyo.
So, I agreed to give him my cell phone because of his intimidation.
Intimidation, tinatawag ko siya, sasaksaan kita pag binigay sa akin cellphone, binenta mo yan. Okay. So, in that case,
the contract
is voidable.
Because there is consent. Pumayag naman ako na ano ko sa kanya. May object. What is the object in that case? The cell phone. May cost and consideration din. Pero yung consent or yung may consent was given through intimidation. May vitiation of consent. May defect. Kaya voidable siya. So, valid siya until annulled. Unlike kung void, talagang no effect whatsoever. Hindi siya valid kasi no effect siya pag void of initio.
So in the example just given to you, Attorney Uy has the option whether or not to ratify it. Ratify meaning kung wala siyang gawin after ma-hold up. For example, hinold up. After ma-hold up, wala akong gawin, edi ratified it. So wala na akong habol. Ganun din naman sa rescissionable pala, that is susceptible din siya sa ratification. But in the example just given, wouldn't it constitute a criminal case?
It's a criminal case. Tinutukan. Ayaw mo na voidable. Wala, siya, on the civil aspect.
Civil aspect. Okay. Huwag na natin pakalmanan yung criminal.
Criminal.
Just given an example na in a contract wherein there was a vitiation of consent. Yun lang naman.
Yung fraud. Karaniwan kasi dyan, fraud. Pero yung fraud, pwede din siyang maging criminal case.
So, more on disclaimer lang na. Yung example na binigyan namin, more on the civil aspect lang of things, not into the criminal aspect. Okay? Kasi ibang usapan na yan. Okay? So, again, clearly, yung voidable contract, kapag yan ay ni-ratify, binding yan as between the parties. Okay? So, you have to file a case in court for annulment if you really want to annul or cancel the contract.
To impugn the validity of the contract.
So, nabanggit mo kanina, Attorney Uy, that the remedy for voidable contract is annulment. So, what is this annulment? Ito ba yung sa kasal? Pwede rin.
Pwede! Yan. Sige, very good example. Ayun, magbigay tayo ng example. Yung sa
psychological incapacity.
Voidable. Kailan nagiging voidable ang marriage?
So voidable or annullable yung marriage na yan kapag of course one of the contracting parties at
There
the
is a
time
defect
may defect
in the essential requisites
of marriage.
of marriage. What are the essential requisites of a valid marriage under Article 2?
Is this about formal requisites or
Article 3, formal
Article 3,
requisites,
formal.
or irregularity in the formal requisites of a valid of a marriage, then voidable din yan.
Family code na tayo dito. Pero that's a classic example of when a marriage can actually be annulled.
Yes.
Because in the presence of a defect in the, for example, in the consent given, or halimbawa may defect na yung essential requisite. No? So again, annulment, this is a remedy provided by law for reason of public interest for the declaration of the inefficacy of a contract based on a defect. So this is for public interest naman talaga. Okay? So kapag merong inefficacy yung contract based on a defect or vice in the consent of one of the contracting parties in order to restore them to their original position in which they were before the contract was executed.
Yes, so dyan na yung papasok din yung vices of consent. Kagaya nung inaral natin dun sa module 6. Sabi natin, 5 yon. May fraud, may mistake, may violence, may intimidation, may undue influence.
Undue influence, yes.
Yun yung vices of consent. And later on, i-discuss din natin yung causal fraud versus incidental fraud ulit.
And nabanggit mo kasi na voidable lang siya kasi may consent naman na binigay. It's just that it's vitiated. Kaya
Yes,
voidable
may
lang.
defect lang. May consent pero defective.
Pero in the absence of consent, ay ibang usapan na yun.
Void na
Void na
yun.
talaga yun. If no consent at all, then void. Defective
Consent, voidable.
Okay. Now, what are the grounds for annulment for the declaration of the nullity?
Yan. So,
Anyway.
first, incapacity to consent, and pangalawa, vitiated consent.
So, dun muna tayo sa incapacity to consent. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng incapacity to consent? For
Or
example,
one of the contracting party is incapacitated to give consent. Although nag-consent, pero incapacitated sila to enter into a contract like minors.
halimbawa, 17 years of age. Binantahan mo ng cellphone.
Oo.
Minor pa lang siya. So, he gave his consent. So, in effect, actually, he is incapacitated.
Yes, he's incapacitated because
But
he
does that mean void yung contract of sale?
No, valid yon until
Annulled.
That is only a voidable contract.
So, an action for annulment should be filed on the ground of incapacity to consent of the minor. Okay.
Oo.
Now, clear naman yung sa vitiated consent na
Yung
pati
lima.
kanina, yung 5, no? So, babalikan natin yun eventually
Yes.
in our discussion. So, let's give an example, Attorney.
Yes.
Halimbawa, if a house is built with conjugal funds on the husband's lot. So, pag sinabi natin conjugal funds, pinagsamang pondo ng mag-asawa. Income ng husband and wife. Ang peculiar lang sa example natin is that yung pinagtayuan ng bahay ay lot nung husband alone. Sa kanya lang yun. So, the house and the lot will be both considered conjugal in that case.
With the husband becoming the creditor of the conjugal partnership to the extent of the value of the lot. Should the husband sell the house and lot without his wife's consent, the sale would be voidable. That is in the case of Mercedes Canullas versus Honorable Fortune.
So, in that case, Attorney Ray, what was lacking? Why? Why would the sale of the house and lot be voidable in that case if the husband alone sold the property? Alright, Attorney Ray, in that example, the reason why yung contract of sale of the house and lot made by the husband alone, it would be voidable because there is a defect in the consent. Because we have to let you know that the rule of law as regards conjugal properties or yung property na pagmamayari ng mag-asawa, hindi mo pwede yung ibenta o i-alienate without the consent of both parties or spouses. So kung isa lang ang mag-consent dyan, the contract is voidable. So it's valid until annulled. So pwedeng ipa-annul yan halimbawa nung asawa na hindi naman nagbigay ng consent. Diba? Kasi sasabihin niya, may vested right ako dyan.
Yes.
And hindi ko in-approve yung contract of sale na yan.
Yes.
And maraming ganyang issue. Nangyayari yan sa mga mag-asawahan. So, tatandaan nyo yun, there must be concurrence of consent between husband and wife in order to enter into a contract as regards the conjugal property.
Yes.
Okay? So, take note of that. So, kung meron tayong period for filing action for rescission, meron din tayong tinatawag na period for filing action for annulment naman. Attorney Boy, ano ba yan? Sige nga.
So, under Article 1391, the action for annulment shall be brought within 4 years. This period shall begin in cases of intimidation, violence, or undue influence from the time the defect of consent ceases. In case of mistake or fraud, from the time the discovery of the same. And when the action refers to contracts entered into by minors or other incapacitated persons from the time the guardianship ceases.
Right, so Article 1391 lays down the rules as regards the reckoning period. Ang malino dito, 4 years pa rin. 4 years lang din. Katulad ng sa rescissible contracts. 4 years ang pinag-uusapan doon. Pero dito may iba't ibang rules as to the reckoning period. So first, 4 years from the time the intimidation, violence, or undue influence ceases. From the time. Kasi kung continuous naman yung violence or yung intimidation, then hindi pa mag-run yung prescriptive period. So, only at the time na mag-cease yung existence ng violence or intimidation or undue influence.
Yes.
How about the second rule, Attorney Boy?
So, from that time, mistake or fraud is discovered. This is so since prior to the time of discovery of the same, the party who is innocent is still unaware of the reason which shall render the contract voidable under Article 1393 and cannot be exempted to bring the action in court.
Yeah. So, malino naman dito na kapag may mistake or may fraud, normally kasi, yung fraud na yan, tinatago nga yan eh, no? So, the only time na magra-run yung prescriptive period natin as regards fraud, from the time of the discovery.
So, kung hindi pa nadi-discover nung injured party, for example, or no one of the parties, hindi pa nadi-discover yung fraud or mistake committed by the other party, meaning hindi pa tatakbo yung 4-year prescriptive period.
Yes, because he is innocent.
And at that time, innocent pa siya noon. Hindi siya aware of the fraud or the mistake of the other party.
Because it would be superfluous, the law itself, kung sasabihin mo na at the time the contract, the voidable contract was entered into, nag-run na agad yung 4-year prescription,
that will be absurd.
Absurd. Kasi hindi pa nga alam na may mistake or may fraud.
Pero yung person bringing the action for annulment of contract by virtue of mistake or fraud must prove, or he has the burden of proof to show that he actually gained knowledge within the 4-year prescriptive period.
Yes, take note of that. No? So, the third one is from the time the guardianship shall cease in the case of contracts which have been entered into by minors or incapacitated persons. Obviously, an incapacitated person has no capacity to sue. So, understandable naman yun. From the time na parang kanina sa rescissible contract.
Kung kailan for minor, upon reaching the age of majority. Kung doon naman sa insane person, upon the time of lucid interval. Ganon.
From the time the guardianship, ito naman yun sa
ceases.
Pag nag-cease na yun. And guardianship, normally, kapag siya ay naging, sabagay, hindi naman lahat ng under guardianship ay minor. Meron pa rin mga, even mga oldies na under guardianship because they're
cannot take care of themselves.
Yes. So, basta, ang rule lang dyan, 4 years after guardianship ceases. Okay? You can still file an action for annulment of the contract. Now, can there be ratification?
Yes.
Yes.
Kagaya ng rescissible, pwede rin ang ratification sa voidable contracts.
And ratification means that one voluntarily adopts some defective or unauthorized act or contract which, without his subsequent approval or consent, would not be binding on him. It cleanses the contract from all its defects from the moment it was constituted. That's according to Article 1390 of the Civil Code. And hence, the action to annul is extinguished according to Article 1392. So take note na, cleanse. Kapag nagkaroon ng ratification, may cleansing effect. and it ano ba? Retroactive yan.
Yung effect.
Yung effect doon sa point that the contract was entered into the parties.
Yes.
There are different kinds of ratification na
Yes, we have express and we have tacit or implied ratification.
So yung express,
so
can be
express
oral.
It may be oral or written. And yung tacit naman is implied as from the conduct implying a waiver.
So, I think self-explanatory yung express, pero let's give an example as regards tacit.
Tacit.
Examples of tacit ratification. For example, a minor bought land but sold the same after reaching 21 years of age to a third person. Can there be a ratification in that case, Attorney Owen?
Yes.
First question pala, meron bang problem muna doon sa contract na yun that the minor entered into?
Yes. So first, when a minor bought a parcel of land, yun pa lang, voidable na yun.
Voidable.
Because a minor is incapacitated to enter into a contract.
So defective
defective
consent.
ang contract. Ang consent. So defective kasi dahil voidable yung contract na. Pero upon attaining the age of 21, the said minor sold the parcel of land to third person.
So instead of annulling it,
Yes, instead of annulling the contract, ang ginawa ng minor is sold the same to a third person. That is implied ratification.
so tacit na
Naging
tinatawag.
valid na.
So the originally voidable contract, when the minor sold it to a third person upon reaching the age of 21,
Kasi ang
becomes
minor,
valid.
upon reaching the age of majority, and within the 4-year prescriptive period, meron siyang choice. Yung una is to ratify o kaya i-annul or i-rescind din yung contract kung rescisable. Kung pinagbenta niya yung lupa, kagaya dun sa example, that is an act of tacit or implied ratification. It cleanses the contract from the very beginning. Parang valid na siya, hindi siya voidable, kumbaga valid na. Pero meron din naman siyang choice na i-annul. In that case, he is impugning the validity of the contract.
But one thing is clear here, you can only choose one.
Yes,
You cannot have tacit
Pwede.
ratification at the same time, you're gonna annul it.
Yes, hindi naman pwede yun.
Hindi pwede. Okay.
May choice lang siya.
You have a choice. Second example sa tacit natin, for example, use of the proceeds by a person who had been previously intimidated into selling his property.
Yan,
Halimbawa, yun na nga, yung sa cellphone kanina.
Yung sa cellphone kanina. Through
Tinakot kita.
intimidation, sabi sa akin Attorney Marat, sige, ipapakalat ko yung yung mga videos na nakakatawa, yung mga embarrassing videos mo. Pagkakalat ko, na humihilig ka, ganyan, sa pagtulog. Tapos sabi, sige, bebenta ko sa'yo. So, mura, binenta ko sa kanya, for example, ng 10,000.
Okay.
Because of intimidation, I agreed to sell my
So defective yung
cellphone.
consent mo.
Oo, defective ang consent ko kasi because I induced to enter into a contract to you because of your intimidation.
So originally the contract of sale should have been voidable.
So I have 4 years from the time
The contract of sale
was entered into within which to file an action for annulment. Pero instead of mag-file ako ng action for annulment, ang ginawa ko, yung binayad niya sa akin 10,000, ipinambili ko ulit ng bagong cellphone. So in that case, that is a tacit ratification. It cleanses the contract from any defect, and the contract will now be valid from the very beginning.
Yeah, and of course, Attorney Uy could not benefit from, alam mo yan, parang i-impugn mo or i-annul mo yung contract of sale at the same time, nagbe-benefit ka dun sa proceeds. So,
that is unjust enrichment.
Unjust enrichment din naman. So, that has been held by the Supreme Court in the case of Matnambayan versus Aquino. Okay? So, kung mangyari sa iyo yan, don't ever use the proceeds, no? Don't ever use the proceeds. Your action should be to annul the contract of sale with the proceeds still intact.
Yes.
No? You have to not use it so that walang tacit ratification. Now, what are the requisites for ratification or of ratification, Attorney?
So, there must be knowledge of the reason behind that renders the contract voidable. Pangalawa, the same reason as mentioned in 8 must have been ceased. And patatlo, the party was injured must have executed an act which necessarily implies an intention to waive his right.
So that's as regards implied gratification. So mahalagang knowledge of the reason behind kung bakit voidable. Parang alam niya na voidable yun eh. May knowledge na siya of the reason why it's voidable, but despite that knowledge, still nag-execute siya ng act which implies his intention to waive the right to annul it. Now, as regards express ratification, attorney.
So the requisites are the same as those for implied ratification, except that such ratification should have been effected expressly. So ang pinagkaiba lang, may express sa sinabi.
Expressly
ratified.
Yung naman
Oral or
is
written.
implication lang.
Through the acts of one of the parties.
Yes. So, attorney, what would be the effects of annulment?
So the parties shall be excused from their obligations if the contract has not been complied with. And yung second effect is in case there has already been performance of the contract, the parties must exercise mutual restitution of the thing with its fruits and the price with the interest.
So those are the effects of the annulment. So meron din tayo tinatawag din na mutual restitution. Parang ganun din sa rescission. Mutual restitution din tayo.
And also the parties are not obliged to comply with their obligations under the contract. They are excused from compliance. At saka may mutual restitution ng thing kung yun ang na-receive mo with the fruits and yung price with the interest.
Yeah. So according to Article 1398 of the New Civil Code, there is a duty of mutual restitution upon annulment. So again, as a general rule, if the contract is annulled, the contracting parties should restore to one another A, the subject matter of the contract with its fruits, and B, the price thereof with legal interest. So may legal interest at fruits na included dito. Now,
so kanina, doon sa example, sa cellphone and the 10,000 pesos, if I opted to choose the remedy of annulment instead of ratification, ang isasawi sa akin ni Mr. Maralit is yung cellphone with the fruits na apple, charot. so kung may fruits man yun, yung cellphone, babalik na sa akin yun. And yung 10,000, may tinubo na yun, ibabalik ko dito kay attorney na
Okay? Now, in personal obligations, under Article 1156, where the service had already been rendered, the value thereof with the corresponding interest is the basis for damages. That's according to paragraph 2, recoverable from the party benefited by the service. So, that's as regards personal obligation. No? So, for example, attorney Uy, if a sale of land is annulled, then the seller must return the purchase price with legal interest, and the buyer must return the land with its fruits naman. So, that's according to the case of Labrador versus De Los Santos and Dumasug and Modelo. So, that's the case of the Supreme Court. Okay? So, malinaw naman yun. Now,
ngayon naman, yung effect ng loss through fortuitous event. What is the effect of review na lang yan sa obligations?
So, parang pangyayari, voidable yung contract, kaso yung object, there is loss through a fortuitous event.
The question is this. In case the innocent party would not be able to restore because there is a loss through a fortuitous event, may he still compel the other to return what he had given?
Medyo tricky to, no? Una, sinabi mo, innocent party siya, pero hindi niya kayang restore because there's loss due to fortuitous event. So your question is, may the innocent party still be compelled?
Kagaya kanina, yung cellphone, hindi mo na masoli kasi nawala through fortuitous event. Or ako, hindi ko na masoli yung 10,000 ko eh. Yung binigay niya sa akin 10,000, yung binayad niya na 10,000, hindi ko na masoli kasi nawala, na-hold up ako. Through fortuitous event na wala. Am I or is the seller obliged to return the cell phone? Yun ang tanong dyan.
In that case, it would seem that the answer to that question, Attorney Roy, is no, it's in the negative. Because before annulment, the contract is valid. Tatandaan natin yan. Bago yung annulment yan, valid until annulled nga, di ba? And the innocent party, being the owner of the thing lost by fortuitous event, must bear the loss. There is, however, an exception to that. And it occurs when he offers to give the value of the thing.
Yan.
So, kung ino-offer naman niya yung value ng thing, halimbawa, yung sinasabi mo kaninang
Nawala na yung
ng
10,000.
cellphone,
Nawala yung 10,000 na binayad mo sa akin.
Oo. But if he is offering to return the same value, then he must be afforded the same remedy na daw. At why? Why is that so? Because that innocent party would be in a worse position than one who had destroyed the thing from his fault, through his fault. And once he exercises this remedy, he can recover from the other what has been previously
yung
given.
kanina, di ba ako yung nag-file ng case for annulment. And then ako, yung 10,000 pesos din na binayad sa akin ni Attorney Marali because of that cellphone, naiwala ko naman yung 10,000 pesos. So, ang general rule, I cannot recover kasi valid yung contract until annul. So, valid pa rin. Pero, if I am willing to give him 10,000 pesos from my own pocket, yung hindi yung binayad niya, then I am still allowed to avail of the remedy of annulment. Meron pa rin yun.
Since innocent party naman siya, and the reason for the loss naman is a fortuitous event, sabi ng batas, bigyan natin ng remedy yung innocent party na yan. Kasi kung hindi natin yan bibigyan ng ganung remedy, mas worse pa yung situation na meron niya siya kesa dun sa isang party na nawala dahil sa kanyang kasalanan, di ba? So, we give premium
so, kung nawala yung pera na 10,000 pesos, I am obliged to give you another 10,000 pesos from my own pocket.
Before you can be given the right
balik-balik
for the restitution. Okay, so on that note, that ends our discussion as regards voidable contracts. And it's very important na ma-differentiate nyo ang rescissible contract and unvoidable contract. Because after this, we're going to talk about unenforceable contracts and void or inexistent contracts. So on that note, we're going to see you again in our next video. And for questions as regards voidable contracts, key in, type your questions below, and we will try our best to answer your questions. This has been Attorney Benedict Marali.
And Attorney April Lambuy.
Lagi nagsasabi, ignorance of the law excuses no one. See ya!